What's up, and welcome to another edition of the Cover 2 Recap, the final Cover 2 Recap from San Bernardino, and it's a very happy day for journalist Jim Mora and the Bruins as they escape San Bernardino relatively healthy. A little bit of the news and notes from today. Walkthrough was kind of the practice today. It was just a lot of no helmets, no shoulder pads, just walking through, making sure all the substitutions were right, all the starters were right. Jim didn't really give us any injury updates, but we saw Scott Quisenberry out here. We saw Devin Lucien out here. We saw Kenny Walker out here. Jake Brendel was out here. I mean, all those guys that were injured and hurt during camp look like they're going to be okay. So, Ryan, getting into this whole San Bernardino recap, I want to give out the All C2R awards. We're going to give our top 5 top performers, top 5 best overall players from camp. But before we do that, I want you to give me some honorable mention guys, some guys that just missed our top 5 cut.
You know, a lot of guys stood out in this camp, and I know we did the 5 guys who weren't necessarily as impressive yesterday, but it was definitely a lot easier picking this list of impressive guys just because of how good they looked during camp this whole last 2 weeks. But a few guys that stood out to me that didn't make the list: Malcolm Bunch. Clearly established himself as the best left tackle on the team. Did really well most of the time, sat out a few days, but looked overall pretty solid. Anthony Jefferson switched back and forth from safety to corner. I know we both thought he looked a little bit better at corner, but obviously he gives that defensive backfield the versatility it needs. Tahan Goodman started really strong. Obviously one of the biggest hitters on the defense. Seems like he's starting to carve a roll out, at least on nickel. And the last guy that stood out, Devin Lucien. I know he got hurt this past week, obviously a scary injury, but before that, he looked like possibly the best wide receiver on this team. He's really kind of stepped in that role as a number 1 guy. So let's throw it over to you. Let's get it started. Top 5 All C2R Fall Camp team.
All right, number 5 is Eldridge Massington. He did, I had to preface this before we get into how good he was. He did get locked up by Fabian Moreau and Anthony Jefferson towards the end of camp. But in that first week and a half, there may not have been a better offensive player on this field. He became Brett Hundley's favorite target real soon in camp, and Brett Hundley went to him early and often. I can remember we were working over here at the dorms, and Eldridge, I don't think, left Brett Hundley's side any time for that first week and a half, when we were working out there and when they were going to get dinner and going to meetings and stuff. So they developed a real good rapport out here, and he kind of just blew up out here. This was really kind of the Eldridge Massington we thought UCLA was getting when they recruited him a couple years ago, and he had a great camp, and we're expecting him to have big things this season. Give me number 4.
At number 4, I have Najee Torin, the freshman guard. Really turned heads at fall camp this year. He was clearly the most physical of any player on that line. I know that was something we normally look to for Alex Redmond, but I would almost say that Najee Torin has maybe that mauler streak a little bit more than even Redmond does. At times, he looked like the best offensive lineman, just all around. He is not necessarily the biggest guy. He's probably going to be the smallest guy to start on the offensive line this year. But at the same time, he looks like one of the strongest. I mean, the guy just has a mean streak. He just takes pleasure in ruining defensive players. He basically told us exactly that. And you could just see that. I mean, while these other offensive linemen are getting hurt, Najee Torin, obviously everyone's tired. Najee Torin is still just running guys down. I mean, he really stood out to me, and at this point, I think it's pretty much a lock that he's going to be, starting at either left or right guard.
Number 3 is Miles Jack. Easily could have been number 1, but we just felt like it wasn't fair to put a Heisman candidate as the number 1 player from camp. But no, he had a fantastic camp. Just every single day, day in and day out, he just did something that made you say, wow, whether it was an interception, whether it was a one-handed grab in individuals, whether it was a big hit, whether it was a tackle for loss, whether it was running stride for stride with Ahmad Harris, one of the faster, quicker, shorter guys on the team. Miles Jack just did it all. I never thought he could get better than what he was last year when he, rushed for 300 yards and 8 touchdowns and had all the tackles and was all Pac-12 freshman year, both sides of the ball. But he looks to be almost twice the player he was last year, and that's just a scary thought. So he's number 3. Give me number 2.
At number 2, this guy's the distinguished honor of being the top freshman pretty much in everyone's mind at camp this fall. Kenny Young just really took hold of that inside linebacker spot. And when you think about how difficult that spot is to master, I mean, defensive coordinators in the past with UCLA and Jim Mora have all said how tough it is to step in so quickly as a freshman and really take over that spot. But Kenny Young did exactly that. He looked like a fierce tackler. He was hitting guys hard. He was also diagnosing the defense probably better than any freshman I've seen in the last few years being out here. At this point, I think he's pretty much a lock to start next to Eric Kendricks. And in that way, it's almost like he's being groomed to kind of step into Kendricks' spot and be that defensive leader. He's already shown this maturity where, he's telling older guys where to go, and he's, telling older guys to pick it up and hustle. And that's not something you usually see out of an 18-year-old kid. He clearly doesn't look like an 18-year-old out here. The dude is massive. At this point, he just has instincts that you don't usually see out of freshman players. Probably has a lot to do with him, spending his spring break in Jeff Ulbricht's office, basically, and just kind of bothering the defensive coaches as much as he could, and that really showed very clearly this August, and I think that's going to show on the field this fall too.
The number one all C2R fall camp San Bernardino player is Fabian Moreau. The cornerback was electric out here. I believe he was in the top 5 or maybe even number 1 in the all C2R spring. But he was just that good out here once again, just locking up everybody. It didn't matter who. I mean, like we said, Eldridge Masking was the 5th best player on his team. Whenever he went up against Fabian Moreau, I think Fabian Moreau won 4 out of 5 times, and if not all 5 times. Whenever Devin Lucien and him went up, he made Devin Lucien look like an average receiver. He was just so incredible this camp. And, Jim Mora called him a potential first-rounder, an All-American, and we kind of laughed at him. We're like, Jim, stop. But after this camp, you could really believe that Fabian Moreau has a shot to be maybe a first-rounder after this year. So he's had just an incredible 2 weeks in San Bernardino. If he continues it into Westwood and into the season, I mean, we may be looking at an NFL pick there in the future.
The craziest thing to me about Fabian Moreau is that, you look on all these all preseason lists anywhere, and his name isn't even on the 4th team. Looking at Phil Steele's, all Pac-12 team, I mean, these are some guys who haven't even started before are being listed over Fabian Moreau. And at this point, next year, I think everyone's just going to be laughing about it. I mean, this guy is clearly an all Pac-12 talent. And just by watching him, you can see how easily he makes it look, or how easy he makes it look. He's just going up and not making a big deal out of it at all. I mean, at this point, it's kind of second nature to him. And I think that's the sign where you know that this guy is going to be a real talent going forward this season.
That'll wrap up our coverage from San Bernardino UCLA Fall Camp. As always, you can follow Ryan's coverage of UCLA on Twitter at Ryan_Karchi. You can follow me on Twitter at Edward Lewis BSR. Until the next time, thanks for tuning in to the Cover 2 Recap.